Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to let people roll into the Zoom meeting. It's going to take just a couple seconds, so bear with us. It's a Thursday. It's Q4. It's a super exciting time. I'm so happy to have my friend Chris McCabe here from eCommerce Chris. I'm Liz Fickenscher from Teikametrics. I'm the e-commerce marketing manager here. Just a couple of administrative housekeeping things as we're getting started. This session will be recorded. The recording will be emailed to you, provided that you registered for this. And I'm assuming that if you're here, you registered for it. We'll also be writing a recap. We'll be posting it on YouTube. It'll be readily available to you, but I encourage you to participate in the live session. This is a Zoom webinar. So there is a Q&A section. There is a chat section. If you have trouble hearing us, seeing us, if you've got any kind of technical difficulties, hit us in the chat. But if you've got questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A section of Zoom. That's at the bottom of your screen, over to the right a little bit. We're not going to do slides today. Chris and I go way, way back. We've got a lot to talk about, and we didn't want to confuse everything with visuals. So I still see a couple people joining. And we appreciate everybody taking the time today. We know it's a crazy busy time, but the topic that we're addressing today is really important, because if you lose your Amazon account, it's harder to get it back nowadays than it used to be. And that's not something that you want to deal with ever, but especially not in Q4. So it looks like the numbers are still trickling. We're going to go ahead and get started because we have a lot of content today. So again, I welcome everybody today to the webinar. I am Liz Fickenscher from Teikametrics. I'm the e-commerce marketing manager here. If you don't know about us, we are a SaaS platform that powers Amazon and Walmart advertising across thousands of brands. We've got hands-on help with our managed services. We've got a self-serve tool, but basically our team acts as an extension of your team, and we're deeply committed to the success of people in e-commerce, brands and sellers alike. So I kind of find it hard to believe that anybody on this webinar doesn't know who Chris McCabe is. But just in case, Chris, why don't you give people a little bit of overview of your background and your business and what you do to support the community?
Yeah, thanks to you and the Teikametrics for doing this at such a busy, crazy time. Hope everyone's safe and keeping well out there. Yeah, I'm Chris McCabe. I started eCommerce Chris, I guess, 6 years ago. I'm ex-Amazon. I used to work on the solid performance teams for about 6 years. So
you actually suspended people on that?
I was one of the, so-called bad guys. Different world back then, but I was one of the people responsible for reviewing accounts and sizing up who needed a warning versus a suspension, suspend a listing versus suspending an account, making those kinds of educated decisions based on the information we had in hand. So now, of course, advocating for sellers on the other side of the fence, helping them deal with my former teams, which, as you noted a few minutes ago, has gotten tougher. And this year it's even harder because the normal delays built into this time of year in their response times are a bit trickier because they're overwhelmed, I think, right now, and there's additional delays. So,
well, there are so many different factors involved with now in our world and in the world of e-commerce. So in your time at Amazon, obviously you investigated people who might be bad actors. You investigated people who might be breaking Amazon policy. I think that probably, and of course you're the expert on this, but I think probably the reasons for suspension action have changed since that time. I think that the whole industry has changed since then. I mean, I've seen it in just my short 5-6 years in this industry. But it's never a good time for an account suspension. So what you're seeing right now, I know you're inundated. You and I talk almost every day, and I know that you're crazy, crazy busy. You and Leah are just answering questions from all over the place, from all different categories, from all different types of sellers.
Right.
What are the top 3 reasons, like kind of across the board right now in October 2020, that sellers and brand owners are facing suspension from Amazon?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Leah McCabe. She and I have been talking about this every day because listing compliance is one major reason why people are getting suspended. Sometimes surprising to me, there are still sellers who are way off base, not following the style guide, like using all caps, or putting seller-specific content into a detail page. So the number of, they call it PDP, product detail page abuse, those types of warnings and suspensions are way up this month and this year. They're taking that extremely seriously. They're not just sending you those general messages saying detail page is corrected, here are the ASINs, here's what you were doing. Now it's a bit more than a slap on the wrist. They're definitely interested in not just cleaning up their catalog, but in punishing people who are ignoring the style guide or aren't looking at the seller help pages or are just oblivious of those policies, or they know the policies, but they interpret them in such a way that they're not following them correctly. And so Leah and you and I are constantly seeing people who are confused at what they might be doing wrong.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. I hate to interrupt, but it's everybody's responsibility to know the rules, and the rules aren't always explicitly stated. So it's very easy to get confused, but it's not like you can write a POA to Amazon and say, oh, sorry, I didn't understand. I didn't know the rules. Or like, I missed that part. I mean, that's not going to fly. You are responsible for following policy to the T.
You can start with saying we were misinterpreting or unaware. I mean, they'll wonder why were you unaware, but you can start your process of dissecting your root causes for any plan of action. I mean, if you're suspended, you need a plan of action in most cases. You can start the root causes process by digging through your knowledge of what you did wrong, saying you weren't aware or you weren't interpreting the policy correctly, but why. They want the why and the how. Just saying you didn't do it right isn't enough. So yeah, you can say you're sorry. That's a good start, but that's not enough. You can say you didn't know. That's a start. They want to make sure you're doing more than just turning the wheels in the right direction. They want to know that you have diagnostic skill and knowledge. So you can present to them, we did this wrong, we did this wrong, we did this wrong because of, due to blank XYZ.
Well, so back to the reasons of suspension though, so we can get through
like listing compliance. Yeah. Listing compliance, not just PDP abuse. Yeah, I mean, there's two main reasons I'm going to talk about now. Either ASIN level complaints, buyers complaining about item authenticity or item condition, item quality, or listing compliance. The only other compliance, there's several reasons why people are breaking the rules and getting suspended. The only other one I wanted to mention was ASIN variations. People tend to come to us and say, we're doing all these variations correctly. We don't know why Amazon's giving us a hard time. We take one look at it and we see that 90% of it's wrong in most cases, or maybe 90% of the people who come to us are doing it wrong. But it's about 90% of the people who tell us they're doing it right. So there seems to be a lot of confusion over correct variation creation versus incorrect. So variations, product detail page, adding seller specific information, or violations of the style guide. Those are the two main compliance suspension causes. And they do tend to take down your whole account these days, not just a few ASINs. Item condition, item authenticity, that's a huge can of worms, because authenticity, especially if you're a private label brand, you're wondering why are they challenging the authenticity of our products. We make our own products. We manufacture them ourselves. Inauthentic doesn't necessarily mean you're selling counterfeit versions of your own products. Inauthentic's like an item quality complaint. Think of it in those terms. Don't just appeal saying, I know I'm kind of getting into the next section in terms of how you resolve this stuff, but don't just appeal saying, hey, we don't sell fake versions of our own products. This is a mistake. What are you talking about? That's a big mistake people make. Item condition complaints as well. Used, sold as new, right? This is a popular way to lose an ASIN, get a listing suspended, but your knee-jerk response can't be, well, we don't sell any used items, so this must be a mistake. Give us our listings back.
So back to the copyright complaint issue. Mm-hmm. That's not always because there's a copyright problem, you said, but what could be causing that? Is that a competitor attack? Is that a black hat thing? Which sometimes Chris is going to cover at Prosper, so you guys should go to Prosper.
Right, Prosper's next
black
week.
Hat tactics.
Yeah, I mean,
know about those.
IP claims and rights ownership is a minefield. A lot of sellers don't understand why they're accused of these, especially private label sellers. Depends on what kind of rights ownership is asserted. Is it patent? Is it trademark? Is it copyright? Copyright seems to be the hot thing right now, because word leaked out that that was an easy way to get a listing knocked down and a hard way for your competitor, I guess, if you're attacking them, a hard way for them to get reinstated, because Amazon itself doesn't understand what they need to ask for you. Amazon itself doesn't understand the nature of your appeal. A lot of seller support reps, some account health reps are telling people, oh, you have to appeal a copyright infringement, because they themselves seem to be guessing at why your listing's down. That's one big stumbling block. So it's sellers not knowing how to appeal because they're not sure why the listing's down. On the Amazon side, you can't necessarily go to them and get clear answers in terms of, is it authenticity? Is it copyright? You could call a few times and get 3 different answers. It's a different product warning. It's a copyright warning. It's an item authenticity warning. So we've had some people coming to us after appealing a few times, and we realize they've been appealing the wrong thing 3 times, and that's why they're not getting anywhere. So only going to get a lot worse in Q4 just because they're so backed up and they're so delayed. I mean, who wants to wait 6 days for an answer and then get an answer that's gibberish that makes no sense? So.
Right. And you sold is new. Does that ever have to do with problems at FBA that you can?
Sometimes, but sellers unfortunately are assuming, I mean, first of all, people are jumping in and appealing these things too hastily. I'm still seeing lots of content in a plan of action that will make no sense to the person on the other side in seller performance. So those are just wasted, burned appeals. It doesn't necessarily, it's a condition complaint. It could mean damaged in transit. It could mean the item was defective. That could be defective for a lot of reasons. Handling, picking and packing, could be manufacturer defect, but they blanket all of those into that one category of, they call it used, sold as new. I just want to drum it into people's heads. That doesn't necessarily mean that Amazon thinks you're selling used product. I know that's counterintuitive, but unfortunately it's the name of a complaint category that they've kind of dragged behind them for years, and they've never changed it. That language should have changed a long time ago. But half of the battle is communicating with these guys, right? We already know that their language in the messaging to you isn't going to be fantastic, and it's going to be off base or inaccurate, flat out inaccurate half the time. You have to up your game on your side to compensate for their communication failures by understanding and diagnosing these initially the proper way, which is, okay, could be an item condition complaint. Let's look at the wide variety of item condition complaints we could have had. Feedback, negative claims, negative feedback, return reasons, product reviews, and then decide how we're going to appeal this. So I think some sellers are just getting into trouble with cart before the horse plans of action.
Right. So, so that is a big problem. Somebody like jumps, they're panicked,
right,
freaked out. They're going to lose revenue. It's awful. So they go ahead and they hastily put together a POA. POA means plan of action.
Yeah, plan of action or an appeal. If they don't ask for a POA, if it's just authenticity, they slap something together. Here's our invoices. Here's our supplier information. We don't sell inauthentic items.
Or heaven forbid they send it to your Jeff, like off the cuff, like at the get-go, which is not the right thing to do. And Chris will address it later.
Jeff's kind of busy. He's not reading those right away. Yeah.
So you do have to appeal, but you have to appeal in the right way. You've really got to figure out the cause of your suspension. You have to figure out a strategic way to approach your plan of action.
Yes.
Would people do that and they submit it to Amazon, what are some challenges that they're facing now?
A lack of response. Even people doing it the right way in a lot of cases aren't getting an answer. And that's more than just delays. That's confusion and poor communication and disorganization on Amazon's side. Unfortunately, you have to change your strategy. I love how you use the word strategic, because we're not necessarily here today to talk about basic building blocks of an appeal, right? Strategy is huge.
Although you have that available on your website.
Yeah, I do. But we're big, one reason we're big in escalating stuck appeals is because strategy wasn't properly considered, I believe, in those earlier stages when sellers were trying to do it themselves. You can appeal, by the way, you can appeal quickly and effectively, but if it's well-reasoned, well thought out and well-researched and well-written, then you can do it. It's possible. We do it all the time, every day, but not everyone's up to that if they don't understand what's happening on the internal team side of Amazon. So a delay in response, whether it's days or even weeks for some people, could be for a multitude of reasons. And that's what I want to impress upon people today. Don't make assumptions. I mentioned account health services. You can call account health reps and try to get some information from them. Maybe they can even tell you It's already been denied. The crazy thing is Amazon often doesn't tell you when it's denied. That's another big piece we should talk about today. You might already be rejected and you're home waiting for a response and it's never, ever coming. And I don't know if account health services reps may admit that and acknowledge that to you, and they may not. But
we have somebody actually who commented in the chat that said we've appealed 3 times and still have no positive answers and delays that are overwhelming. So this is a huge pain point.
Yes. And it's possible that you are still waiting for a response, and account health reps will tell, just for an example, I'm not saying pin all your hopes on what they tell you, but one avenue of approach, one initial step is try to contact them and say, look, was this reviewed and denied? If so, what are the denial notes? Sometimes they're cagey about that. Sometimes they say they can't tell you what's annotated on your account, but they can give you paraphrase. They can look at it at least and give you a sense of why it was denied. If they tell you they can't, hang up, call somebody else. I know it's frustrating to call 2-3 times and it takes a lot of time. But there's a big difference between I'm still waiting for an answer because Amazon's way backed up because of the influx of appeals this week, and no, you've been reviewed, you've been denied, they want something different. Okay, what is that different thing?
Well, so this person who has appealed 3 times and still has had no positive answers started in Europe. They're based in Italy. They're selling very well in 6 European countries. They were invited to sell on the US marketplace. And they signed up, but immediately after the account was open in the US, they got it suspended due to missing documentation.
Verification suspensions.
Proving the address of the company in Italy. And they presented the exact same documents that were accepted in Italy, and the US keeps saying the docs are not valid.
Yeah.
Which is a service invoice. So,
another good reason to call account health and say, what's missing? I can't resubmit documents all day without knowing what's missing. They should at least give you that, a sense of what it is. Verification, I have to caution you, verification suspensions, the line of appeals for those is 1.5 miles long. There's so many people stuck in the verification process. I'm kind of surprised it hasn't been more of a kind of public scandal at how many people are simply trying to sell and get products on the site and get commissions in Amazon's pockets, and how disinterested Amazon is in fixing that process. But lower level staff, lower degrees of assessment, it's really tough to get answers from that team. So you have to kind of settle in for the long haul, or just start escalating it right away. But make sure if you escalate it, you have all the documents they could ever possibly want or need, and you know they're just not reviewing them properly. Otherwise, don't escalate it yet.
And again, not again, but I like to remind people that this isn't a malicious act by Amazon. Amazon has grown so much that it's very, very difficult, I think, for them to get these processes in hand.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of craziness, and it's not just because of volume. Some of it's just they've fallen behind. I didn't mean to cut you off before you actually asked your question.
No, but you're carrying it right where I wanted you to.
But I'm already kind of going in that direction.
Cool.
I mean, look, I just want to prepare people. There's going to be a lot of things that don't make sense. There'll be messaging that doesn't make sense. You'll send them exactly what they ask for. They might ask you for the same exact stuff again. And if you do call account health, say, I've gotten the same response 6 times in a row. I've responded with everything that was asked for. Can you just tell me what's annotated on the account, or at least what the reason is for me getting the same answer over and over?
Well, because
some people get a different answer every time, right? Sometimes it's just like changing the reason that you have to appeal every time.
I see that a lot.
That's nerve-wracking. Like, some of it's just, I don't want to tell people be patient, temper the frustration with strategy sessions in terms of how you can talk your way around this stuff. But if you're getting the same, garbage response from them every time, then don't just keep going through the same thing over and over. I mean, that is a good reason to escalate something. That is a stuck appeal, essentially, not just stuck because you're not getting a response. It's stuck because Amazon's not taking it seriously. Like Liz said, they're way behind. I mean, what's the quickest way of explaining it? People are moving around. Sometimes they're grabbing people from other teams. They have a backlog. They're trying to catch up. They grab people that aren't even used to working on this stuff sometimes, throw them into the queues. Those people are barely trained, barely know what to do. You get the predictable result, which is a nonsensical response.
Well, and you have to, when I was working a lot with reviews and reviews abuse and doing compliant review requests in my previous role at eCom Engine, I it was interesting to me that there's not like a playbook that that I can, and I've actually asked a couple of support people at Amazon, is there like a PDF that you follow or a handbook that you follow regarding these things? What I saw a lot when I was working with that kind of stuff was that a lot of it's actually left up to the interpretation of the representative that you're talking to,
which is crazy.
So it can be different every single time, and it can be weirdly like different every time too, because somebody's like, this is my interpretation of the rules, and additionally I think you should do this, or I don't think you should do this, and it's not in Amazon policy anywhere, but that's what they think. They're trying to help, but there's no playbook that they can use that's okay, this is definitively, I mean, we can say all we want that the policies in Seller Central are like the Bible in and of itself in terms of selling on Amazon. But as we know, those policies aren't always clear.
If you're relying on a support rep to interpret policy for you, then you're already in trouble, because they might know the policy less than you do. Certainly less than, Liz, you and I understand them to be. We know how to interpret the policy in ways that sellers, in order to coach and educate sellers on what they need to do. The rep might not have that kind of training or experience. They might suggest things to you just to give you an answer. But that's
we've seen the new, hit the fan enough times that we can.
Well, I mean, and you can't, if you get suspended for what a support rep says, definitely don't put that in your plan. We were told by a rep to do it this way. That will mean nothing to seller performance. I'm not saying that's right or that makes sense, but they're going to say, why were you asking them? Why were you relying on them? Here are the policy pages. We give you all the information here. So they don't want you calling, and you definitely don't want to put in a plan of action. Well, from now on, we're going to call support and make sure we run everything by them before we do it. No way. No way do they want you calling them and relying upon them. So it does depend on your interpretation. And the policies aren't going to be 100% set in stone, but that's probably not going to, they have SOPs, they exist, but the complexity of all this, the variety of questions they can be asked, there's no way that you're going to get steady, solid, consistent answers from these guys anytime in the near future.
Unfortunately. One thing that I've been thinking about that we talked about yesterday when we were talking is that,
since we talk every day.
Almost every day we do. We talk a lot. I always have a Facebook Messenger window open and Chris is there. Just like, how's your day going? Well, this happened. This crazy thing happened.
Because these things are constantly, like, there's never a dull moment with this stuff.
And it's evolving.
Every week there's a new landmine that we have to steer people around.
Absolutely. One thing that I've been wondering about though, so in my experience, a lot of times you can get dinged for something and then you go to appeal it, but you don't fix the thing that's wrong, right? So you've got a non-compliant review request, you've got an ASIN variation problem, you've got a listing compliance problem, and you go ahead and do your POA and say, I'm gonna fix it. But then they go and look at your account and you haven't fixed it yet. But what you're seeing is that they fixed it 5 months ago. But all of a sudden they're getting a message saying, hey, you're not compliant because there's a backlog. Is that because there's a backlog, or is that because?
Typically it's not something that you fixed 5 months ago. I think what some people might be showing you is Amazon's telling you to fix your listing before appealing for reinstatement of the listing, but you can't. You can't actually go in and make the change. All you can do is write your appeal stating what you're going to change as soon as you have access again. Like, that's one use case. You shouldn't be getting warned for something you did 5 months ago.
Okay, good.
I mean, when you talk, I think you were referring to reviews abuse issues, and that's one of the things I left out of my, top Q4 suspension causes, because usually they don't suspend for reviews abuse so much in Q4. This year might be different. They've got the buyer-seller messaging guidelines that they're fully expecting everyone to follow as of the 3rd, right?
Right, and we had Becky on when that talk about that.
So we're hanging on to our hats for 2 weeks from now. But
November 3rd.
Sometimes people are reported for reviews they got recently from a practice they were doing 2 months ago, and they haven't tried to get reviews that way since the summer, and they're hit for it in the fall. So reviews abuse is an example of something that you might be reported for, and you're no longer doing it. The policy investigator looking at your account might not actually take the time to go through and say, well, what's the date on this message? I mean, they might just look at the abuse report from one of your buyers, or of course, if a competitor buys from you and shows screenshots of an insert that you use in your packaging.
Inserts.
Well, I mean, inserts could be, you might not have sent in new shipments of inventory with new inserts, but there might be some left in FBA that you never pulled that had, so reviews abuse is a good example of that, but you should not be getting warnings.
People kick in.
The X-ray vision, but no, it's
psychics.
I mean, they can pull a box and look inside if somebody buys from you.
That's not as fun though.
It doesn't matter.
To think about.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's a competitor or not. You're barking up the wrong tree if you say, well, this is just a competitor reporting us. If it's valid, it doesn't matter who reported it, to be honest.
So Chris, let's take a moment and address, we've gotten a bunch of questions and they're relevant to this stuff. So let's go ahead and pause and address some of these questions and scenarios.
I have one I wanted to start with that I saw. Can I start?
Yeah. Are you seeing these too?
I see them pop up. I see that there's a couple dozen in there. The one I saw, happened to see, my ASIN, I appealed, my ASIN was supposed to be reinstated because they messaged you saying that they had reinstated it. I think her name was Anna. So this happens, this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about, of one act, they have to do two actions, one of them doesn't fit with the other one. Maybe they just annotate your account that they're doing something, but they don't send you a message. They were supposed to do two things, they only did one. Or they sent you a message saying they're reinstating the ASIN, they read your appeal, sounds great, but they didn't take the other action in the tools and actually reinstate the ASIN. This is something that's spiking right now, and I expect a lot of this in Q4. This happens all the time. What we've done historically is send a message into seller performance. Of course, these days, half the time you email them and they say, this is the wrong channel, wrong path to an appeal, which is crazy. We can talk about that later. Send an email, say the investigator didn't take the right action in the tools. They reinstated us. They should have reinstated the listing. They accepted our appeal. They didn't reinstate in the tools. Try that first. So that's the first advice for Anna. You might have to rotate back and push them and say, we already asked a couple of times, if it's that many, for an investigator to go back, see that we've been reinstated, take the action in the tools, let us sell this item. We can't get live listed on the site. You're welcome. But that's an excellent example of one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing. It's going to look crazy and inconsistent and weird to you, but for them, it's not going to be surprising at all. Like if a second investigator looks at what the first person did, they're not going to be shocked at all that that person sent you that message and didn't do the other part of it. They're rushing, they're making mistakes. A lot of it's just because there's not a lot of managerial oversight of what these guys are doing. I mean, if there is, it's not significant or it's non-existent because there's so many mistakes on their side. There's so many things missed. Unfortunately, this sounds crazy. You're going to have to pick up their slack. If they miss something, you're going to have to remind them. If they make a mistake, you're going to have to point it out. So.
We had one earlier from an anonymous source. Hello, anonymous person. Yes. It said 90% of people think variation creation is wrong. What are the wrong reasons for ASIN variation that you see the most? And if this isn't something that you want to like go into hardcore,
I'll do a quick answer.
Okay.
We've just seen people using the wrong variation themes. There's people using quantity for size for quantity. We just see a lot of mixing and matching with that. Misusing color themes. There's a lot of people who take a child ASIN from a parent and treat that child ASIN as a parent and make variations off of that. Rudimentary mistakes like that. Most of the time people say that they're doing it because they see other sellers doing it. That's not to use the 90% example again, but most of the time that's what they say they're doing. That's why they say they're doing it. Well, we see other sellers in our category doing it. That's why we did it that way. Okay. But 90+% of sellers seem to be doing this stuff the wrong way.
If all the sellers jumped off a bridge, would you jump off the
bridge?
Right.
Right. Just because, and this goes back to the PDP abuse issue either. Hey, I saw somebody else using all caps. Why can't I do it? I saw other people putting seller specific information about, guarantees or about refunds or about shipping on their detail page. Why can't I do it? They're doing it wrong. That's not a reason for you to get yourself in trouble just because you're matching what they're doing. If you think they've got a competitive advantage over you because they're adding things that you shouldn't, you can report them and do your part to clean the catalog up. I'm sure Amazon will appreciate that, but you can't just copy them. Two wrongs don't make a right. And so that's all I was saying about variations. Most people aren't doing a double check to make sure they're doing it right, regardless of what other people are doing. Just put on some blinders, shut your eyes to what other people are doing for a minute. Make sure you're doing it correctly before you start putting things live on the site.
Got it. All right. We've got
more
a seller who said, we sold Italian designer shoes, brand name redacted, to a customer in Italy. At the beginning, she claimed the shoes were not authentic and wanted to get a refund for that reason. They got a letter from the brand head office saying that the boutique for their original official seller for 20 years and shoes that she got were authentic. And then Amazon stepped in, took money from the account, and the shoes were never returned to the seller.
Right.
Nobody has replied to their emails, and basically they lost $500 in goods, and Amazon kept the goods and the money.
If Amazon thinks it's a legit counterfeit complaint, they will do that. You must prove otherwise. If you're being ignored.
So a letter from the official head office of the brand is
necessary,
but it's not good enough?
No, it was probably not processed correctly. It was probably ignored by the people who read it. Maybe they didn't read it. Let's be honest. Some of it's wrongful processing of an appeal. Some of it's ignorance and looking around or ignoring an appeal.
Got it.
Either way, you have to come back. Don't expect, account health services, you can get maybe some ideas on why something's been ignored, like I said earlier, why it's been rejected. Don't expect them to solve it for you. Don't expect seller performance email queues or appeal buttons to solve it. If you have to escalate it, you're going to have to start chasing managers of these teams and saying, why are your investigators doing this?
And we're going to get into escalation tactics in a minute, but I want to tackle some of your questions first because I want this to be interactive.
We'll save escalations to the end because I know that's a hot topic.
It's a hot topic.
You might have to escalate just to get an answer because they haven't responded, period. So.
But a lot of people don't know how to escalate. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Yes. We have another person who said that they received a notice from Amazon stating that they had a product that was used, sold as new, get negative feedback, and that their account would be suspended if it wasn't fixed. They never saw the product that they shipped from the supplier to Amazon. So in that situation, so like if you know your product is fine when it gets to FBA, that's one thing. But if you don't know what your product looks like by the time it gets to FBA, then that's something that you probably need to address with product inspections. And we've got people we can hook you up with that do that.
Quality
that's
control,
your problem.
Packaging examinations, quality control, look at similar complaints from past buyers in terms of item condition. I mean, I would say get under a microscope any item condition complaint you've had on that ASIN, whether it's recent or not, just to get a sense of what they might be complaining about. Don't just assume FBA sent it to a buyer, it got returned, they said it was still new and sent it to a second buyer. A lot of sellers make that mistake. Don't make that assumption. Don't make really any assumptions. Do your research first. Don't finger point. Don't have any knee-jerk reactions.
When if you don't have a QA process in place, you need that before you ever go back at Amazon. Because if, for instance, the item was damaged or the wrong color or it smelled funny or whatever.
Right. Could be a wrong item.
And you don't know, you need to know what's going into FBA. Let's tackle a couple of the questions from the actual Q&A section, which is where you guys are supposed to be putting these, but I'm not going to shake my finger.
Do you want me to go into the box here, or are you going through them?
I'm going to read them to you so that we've got
They seem to be
all
piling up.
Yeah, they are.
Not to put any pressure on you, but.
Well, I mean, you're very popular and you know a lot of stuff, so it's cool. And we've got another half hour to go, so it's fine. So Joe asks, some listings have 30 plus sellers who have the ability to change or alter the listing content. Too many cooks in the kitchen make it impossible to prevent content from getting incorrectly updated. How can we make sure our content stays within the style guide with so many people changing listings constantly?
Yeah, I mean, if the listing content changes and there's different software there that helps you track when there's been changes to a listing, you might have to hop off or delist on that listing temporarily until it gets fixed. I'd definitely say don't continue to sell. I mean, if there's 30 odd sellers on a listing that's constantly changing, I mean, that's a warning sign to begin with that maybe you're, playing with fire a little bit, because you're not going to maintain integrity of the content accuracy on that listing. It's almost impossible for you to do it. It's almost impossible for Amazon to do it. There's just too many, like you said, too many cooks in the kitchen. But at least be aware when the content changes on that detail page and you have a different item in FBA than what's represented on that page, so that you can hop off that listing. Don't relist until you've corrected it and you make sure, whether it's you or someone else, whether it's information from the manufacturer's website, from you or from another of the 30 sellers, make sure it's corrected before you get back on that live listing. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for a, materially different complaint. Could come across as inauthentic, or just different item complaint.
Next question. We are Amazon FBA sellers, and they have been since 2013, but they also do multi-channel fulfillment through Amazon, if I'm not mistaken. Fernando, pop in the chat if that's correct. You do it through Amazon, because that will change the answer to the question. But would an account suspension also affect the multi-channel fulfillment? You raised your hand, so I'm thinking, yeah, you do it through Amazon. Will they stop? So will they stop fulfilling orders to other channel customers if the account is suspended on Amazon?
I haven't been working with that many multi-channel people, to be honest. I've been working mostly with people who are doing fulfillment just through Amazon. Or
if I had to guess, since all that's fulfilled through your Amazon account, I would guess yes, but we'll check on that for you and get you a definitive answer. My utility bills have my name and address in all caps. Do you think I should have all caps for my address in my Seller Central account? Also, my water bill has—
They have to match 100%. Yeah, the utility bill might get rejected if there's differences. I've seen the all caps thing be a problem before, so make sure they match 100%.
My water bill has the name of my family trust in addition to my name. Will this be a problem for identity verification if the trust is not in my seller account?
Yeah, could be.
So what do you do in that case?
It's too hard to—
on all your utilities?
It's too hard to predict. It's too hard to predict how they'll respond to differences. I would say the only way you know for sure that you've got something worthy of an escalation when it's ignored is by making sure it's 100% match. It's totally consistent. If you start having all sorts of extraneous information, first of all, a utility bill can be adjusted. I mean, if you need to go to your utility company and say, this is what I need to be reflected on my utility bill, they should be able to change that for you. There might be some time that goes by. But,
especially in the time of COVID.
But even all caps, I've seen that undermine somebody's appeal. Yeah.
How about this one? We are a brand that has unauthorized third-party sellers selling below map. And what is the best way to have these listings removed quickly? And if you don't mind, I'll take this one.
Yep.
There are people who can help you with that, anonymous attendee. One that comes to mind is Brand Guard. Contact Joe Kovacs there. Tell him I sent you. Shannon Roddy with Marketplace Seller Courses helps with that sort of thing. So get help for that, because it's going to be a lot easier to use a professional than to try to tackle that yourself, especially when you've got multiple third-party sellers that are unauthorized selling your ASINs. So email me, Fickenscher at Teikametrics.com, and I can make an introduction, okay?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about, when we say unauthorized, a lot of this gets misused. You can't gate your listing, right? Map isn't something that Amazon's responsible for. You can't— a lot of people misunderstand brand protection with, well, these guys aren't authorized to sell our stuff on Amazon. Well, is the item authentic or isn't it? Is it counterfeit? Yeah, of course, you're reporting that for counterfeit and you're reporting intellectual property violations. But you can't just complain to Amazon, well, they're not authorized to sell our stuff. That's between you and your distribution channels. That's not an Amazon problem. That's you managing who can sell your stuff.
Well, and somebody commented, be careful with that below map thing. There's no such thing as unauthorized sales and you can get sued. And that's true in some cases, but there are people who can help find the unauthorized sellers that aren't using official invoices. And there are things that people can do to help at least weed out the amount of unauthorized sellers that especially that are hurting your business more. Gosh, you guys are so engaged. I love it. I don't know that we're going to be able to get to all the questions because we only have 20 minutes
I was going to say, if we have about 20 minutes to go, right? So Obviously, I can be reached through this site. I was going to say it at the end, but just in case we're answering questions, up to the bell, ecommercechris.com. But also people can, especially part of the Teikametrics family, we're all in Boston here, so we're all family. Email me directly. You're not, yes, personally, but Chris at ecommercechris.com. I'm happy to answer questions. If I don't get to it tomorrow, I can answer this weekend as well.
Well, and maybe we can do some piece of content around the questions here. And
didn't we do that last time where I did kind of a follow-up article based on the questions we had?
Yeah, so I'll send Chris all of the chats and all of the questions. So if you don't get your question answered today, please don't be mad.
Or
if you raise your hand, I don't know what to do with you. So if you've got a comment or you've got a question, put it in the Q&A and put it in the chat, because raised hands aren't going to show up in my report and we're not going to be able to know what your question is.
Yeah, so write an actual question. And I'm sorry if I give a too brief answer to a complex question. It's just because of the limitation.
And he's totally able to expand on that, trust me. Somebody else. I
have quiet times.
I know you do.
Yeah, I don't talk constantly.
What about warehouse suspensions for performance-related issues? We're in the middle of a pandemic, yes, and the supply chain is disrupted and mistakes and errors happen. I assume that you're talking about getting throttled at FBA because of your inventory performance index score, anonymous attendee. If that's the case, there are things that you can do to help that, to help manage your supply chain, even when there are mistakes and errors happening. Like, for instance, check your stranded inventory. Check it every day. Check it a couple of times a day. That's one thing you can do to help stop the bleeding. But there are other things you can do too. There might be some resources that we point you to in the recap. So keep an eye out for that. Let's see.
I also wanted to throw can I ask a quick question just to see if anyone answers? How many people are getting the pre-POA request? In other words, you have 72 hours to write a plan of action or we will suspend you.
Now you can raise your hand for that.
Raise your hand for that, because there's been a dramatic downturn in the number of times they were so far behind in answering appeals. I think they kind of dialed it down for a while, but then I also saw a few of them recently, and I'm wondering if those are going to be coming back.
4 out of like 200
people. And then we had a couple of people who got the request for a plan of action, and they said you have 72 hours, and or some people even 24 hours. In a panic, they put something together, like maybe they showed it to me right before they sent it in, after writing it, whatever, and then they sent it in to beat the deadline, and then they never heard back. And like 3 weeks go by, and they're wondering if there's some dark cloud hovering out there where eventually it's going to rotate around to them and rain on them when they decide not to accept the POA. Some people never hear back. I had somebody like 2 months ago, they haven't heard back. So it's crazy that they put this panic into you. They ask you to appeal, and then they don't even have the ability to track those to the point where there's a queue where they know that they owe you an answer for those. It seems to be lumped into the same pile. It's just another one of the crazy things. We're ready for craziness this quarter anyway, but that's an additional part of craziness that we don't need.
Absolutely.
So I'm just curious. However many people are experiencing that, let me know, because I'm kind of tracking that phenomenon.
I love this question. Does being a brand owner, selling in multiple marketplaces, investing in advertising, sponsored brands and sponsored products, and using Amazon lending over and over reduce the risk of your account being suspended?
I mean, lending is just a commonplace thing that you either need a loan or you don't. It doesn't really offer you any protection.
Right, but if you're in a financial relationship with Amazon, does that work in your favor at all?
I mean, I suppose if you've got a high level loan of like $750K, they might think twice before suspending your account. But really, the Amazon lending people only get kind of a vote or a half a vote in that process. It's not really up to them to decide, don't suspend this guy. I've talked to some people in lending before that would sometimes just tell you, yeah, we don't tell seller performance what to do. If they want to suspend you, if you're worthy of suspension, then, you know, it's trouble for us if we're going to have trouble recouping that loan, but that's not part of the decision-making process.
Do you feel like being the brand owner and having brand registry and participating in sponsored products and sponsored brand ads, it works in somebody's favor? Are there less of those types of sellers being suspended than sellers that don't have those things? I think they race through these decisions so quickly and poorly in most cases that they just don't really
take the time to look at how long you've been selling or what your revenue level is. They can see.
Or what type of seller you are.
What kind of seller you are. I mean, obviously reading a plan of action, depending on what the problem is, they can usually tell if you're private label or not. I mean, that's something that they'll understand. But we're getting to the point where they're rubber stamping denial. Sometimes rubber stamping reinstatement, which is great because you might have a subpar plan of action that gets accepted. I've seen
well,
those.
And there is machine learning involved with a lot of this, with ASIN variation examinations, with abuse examinations, with IPI, and all different things about your account that is being informed by machine learning that Amazon employed and talked about in 2018. So it's been going on for a while.
Yeah, and God only knows come 2021 sometime, or even a year from now, Q4 next year, will there be even more auto responses?
Well, so what's flagging things? That? What, you know, and obviously getting that information from Amazon is going to be darn near impossible, but hopefully they're learning through the POAs that they receive and the reinstatements that they're doing and tweaking things. I mean, like,
hope.
You know.
Occasionally the people, you still have human beings reading appeals, right? I mean, for everyone who thinks, oh, this was just a bot response, it's really a person reading it. They're acting like a bot. So you've got bots acting like bots and people acting like bots. Is that going to be the same a year from now as bots acting like bots and bots handling a lot of these? There's no auto response. There are auto responders to email queues, but appeals are not adjudicated by bots. So writing to Jeff, I mean, I understand there's a lot of confusion out there. How do you escalate things? Maybe we should shift into the escalation portion now.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because you're going to get stuck more easily this year than in any other prior year. Go ahead.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. And we were going to talk about what's the best way to avoid suspension. I think we did cover that a little bit.
I got into it.
Yeah, you did.
Answer performance notifications. Don't ignore things. You get I'll make it quick. You get a policy violation, dissect how you violated it previously and how you're going to ensure you follow it from now on.
Or don't violate policy.
And don't violate policy to begin with. But if you have to counter those, I mean, get a response in writing back to them about that. If it's an ASIN level, like we were saying, a condition, complaint, or a quality, whether or not they're asking you for a plan of action in particular, get a response back in, an appeal as a response, and get that listing reinstated, even if you don't plan to sell it in Q4, or maybe you never plan to sell it again. Mop up your account health. Don't leave those marks against your record hanging out. I don't know. I guess it still mystifies me with all the content that we do. I mean, that I do especially, but even that you and I have done over the years, that people let these things sit and rot and just the problems mount. I understand sometimes you don't know what to do, and that's why you don't act, but figure out what you need to do and then act. Don't just stay in that sort of analysis paralysis of, well, we're going to wait and see if this hurts us. It's already hurt you if it's showing up in your account health. So you already want to prevent, you're supposed to be avoiding a suspension at all costs all the time. The only way to do that is to handle these notifications as they come in, and especially ASIN level suspensions. So
there's one more question that I want to put out there, because this is interesting. First of all, Kevin said it's very helpful to get the perspective of someone that has spent time on the seller performance team, and I agree with that. He received and responded to a used sold as new complaint, which is the only mark on their account health page, in June.
Awesome.
The listing was never suspended, and Amazon it wasn't suspended.
Did you say in June?
Yeah, in June.
Oh, long time ago.
The listing was never suspended, and Amazon didn't require them to file a plan of action, but they did anyway. They proactively did anyway.
Okay.
The issue is still showing up in account health because it does for 6 months. Is it ever reviewed again during that 6 months, or are they done? Do they not need to worry about it anymore?
I mean, if you poke them on it, they'll review your appeal, but you're not actually in a position where you have to appeal. We've stopped recommending to people to send in a plan of action when they haven't asked for one. If they only ask for invoices, send them the invoices. You can send an appeal saying we need to be reinstated. These items are authentic. Here are the invoices. But that's not the same thing as writing a plan of action. Amazon seller performance teams are so disorganized and confused. This is the recurring theme today, that if you're not asked for something, don't, if you're not asked for a plan of action, don't send them an actual 3-part appeal, like plan of action. If it's from June, I mean, that's about to fall off in like a month. And the listing's still active. And that's the only one you've got, Kevin. So that's kind of like an outlier for you. That's not something you have to worry about a ton.
Bummer that it's still on your account health page, but hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, even if it was suspended and you got it reinstated, I don't know how many people know this. The tools are so old and clunky and in need of an update. It might still say a 1 instead of a 0 there, even if you got it reinstated, because the account health dashboard doesn't update reliably, often enough, consistently. So you might even get what you were supposed to get when you got reinstated to sell the ASIN. You weren't suspended, but I'm saying for somebody else in a comparable position, and the dashboard wouldn't even update anyway. You'd still see a 1 instead of a 0.
Right.
So keep in mind that they know that their tools don't even reflect accurate information. They should know, because we know it. And until they swap out Seller Central or the account health dashboard for something improved and better, which God only knows when that'll be, that's going to be the case. So
it's too much other stuff going on.
But I mean, by the time they read the next thing he sent in, it would be almost falling off his account anyway.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah. Not something to escalate. Let's put it that way.
There's so many good questions. You guys are awesome.
I know. Well, this is what my thought is, because we only have like eight minutes or so.
Well, and
left.
I want you to go into escalation.
Escalations. I'm going to make it quick, important. And then we'll switch to the questions. Because escalations, I mean, this almost helps us do it faster. Escalations have to be custom. They have to be unique. When you're writing an escalation letter, let's say your account suspended to go with your plan of action, that's potentially combined with your POA, but it's not the same thing as writing a plan of action. Escalations are requesting a new review. Maybe there's been a mistake on Amazon side. Maybe they're just not answering you, period. Doesn't even matter how good your POA is. You're escalating, just get a response. Or you got a generic, we don't have enough information to reinstate your listing, reinstate your account, and they don't tell you anything else. You called account health to try to find out why. They don't know either. Lots of times they don't know any more than you do, unfortunately, crazy as that sounds. So you're escalating to, we sent in a plan of action. Everything we were asked for is in it. Weeks have gone by. We, have to wait 10 days just to get an answer. It's Q4. We need some help here. We need a manager to review this. All of that content that goes into your escalation letter that I was just paraphrasing is in addition to the plan of action. The people who are out there, whether they're people who say they do the same kinds of consulting I do, sellers, Amazonians, whoever it is that's out there that says, take the POA, don't change it, send it the same way, 6 different places without adding unique content or without customizing escalations. There are so many teams that you could be escalating to. They have totally different mission statements. Maybe not totally different, but they have different mission statements. They have different goals. If you're not customizing it to what they do and why they should review the work of another team, they might not transfer it anywhere. They might toss it, right? And that just makes it more likely that you won't get an answer. So the number one message here is, don't just say, we need to escalate. Dear Jeff, we need to escalate. We got rejected. We don't know why. What's going on? Here's my POA. That's not an escalation. You might think it is because you used the word escalate. And again, there might be, I understand there's lots of misleading, ambiguous content out there about this topic. For me, for somebody that worked on Bezos escalations for years and since as a consultant, escalations are a very specific kind of strategy. Don't wing it, don't guess, don't copy and paste. You're just digging a deeper hole by doing that.
He can help you.
You're raising your hand. Oh, you're pointing at my box.
Yeah, he can help you.
And Liz understands. Liz understands this too, because not to belabor the point, but how many times have we talked about this over the years? We haven't seen, maybe this is my fault and maybe I need to do a better job publicly. We haven't seen enough sellers educate themselves about the escalation process and understand that shooting from the hip does not help. Carefully crafted responses. I understand that you get nonsensical gibberish from Amazon. We all know that. That doesn't mean you can retaliate with nonsensical gibberish on your side. It's not going to help you sort it out.
2 wrongs don't make a right.
2 wrongs don't make a right. I get the frustration. I get where people are coming from. I called these teams like account health. They don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. The messaging's vague, and there's very little objective information up in there. It's blank basically. Unfortunately, you are still the one who has to up your game because of the nature of your power relationship with these teams. They hold sway over you. It doesn't seem fair, but life isn't fair at Amazon a lot of the time. It's up to you to pick up their slack. I know that sounds ridiculous. It's not something I would have said when I was working there, but it's something that's true today.
So here's a great example. An anonymous attendee says, we've been selling on Amazon for over 7 years. One of our products, which we sold thousands of, was hastily suspended after one person complained of going into anaphylactic shock after opening the package. The product is a belt. What's disturbing is that they asked Amazon how they verify the complaint to assure it wasn't generated by a competitor, and Amazon didn't want to hear anything and will only
don't assume it's from a competitor. It could be from a crazy buyer.
But Amazon said you need to submit lab testing.
Yeah.
Guilty and proven until proven innocent. That is frustrating, but do they go ahead and get the lab test on the belt?
I don't know why you contact me privately about this one, because they shouldn't be asking for lab tests for a belt. This is a good example of
they don't understand that it's a belt. Yeah.
They don't understand.
They still don't get it.
Right.
Yeah. So
that's Amazon not racing through something, or not understanding what the product is, or the buyer. Sometimes the buyer's reporting the wrong order, and it's like they're complaining about a different item, but they did it on your order, your page.
So belt seller, contact Chris.
Right. Appeal it as an error, but do it. Don't just say this is the belt. We don't have lab tests.
So Chris at eCommerceChris.com.
Yeah. Email, or I have a contact form on my site, but for the purposes of this, Chris, CHRIS at eCommerceChris.com. Happens all the time. All the time. There are brand owners getting asked for prove your rights ownership stuff.
Oh, remember that hazmat thing? Is that still going on?
The pesticides?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's still going on. There's still people who are like, it's because there's language in their listing that triggered a pesticide warning, and that's a bot reaction. But usually you can fix that by removing the language. I know people are going to say, we did that and they didn't put the listing back up. We took that language out. First step, identify the language that may have triggered that. Maybe it's false positive, maybe it was real. Delete that from the listing, or appeal saying we're removing that listing content as soon as it's accessible. And then if you're getting a response back, no, we can't reinstate, you have to escalate it from there, because they're not reading what you're like. If you don't get somebody who reads what you say, no matter what you say, then that's an escalation automatically, right? If it's something on your side, you certainly don't want to escalate something if they told you to remove language from a listing, like an unsubstantiated health claim, and you removed the wrong one, or you didn't remove them all, or you didn't know what to remove. You gotta check yourself first before you start sending in appeals. Otherwise, they will stop responding if they think you have no idea what you're doing. So, last 2 minutes. Do you want to?
One more.
Chat and run, but
one more. We introduced some private label products recently. We sell licensed merchandise on Amazon and have been doing that since 2018. We received an intellectual property infringement notification for a word used in our listing. We didn't know that someone took a copyright on that word. We were told that we were not aware. We told Amazon that we were not aware of the copyright and that we're ready to relist. We took that word out, and we have stranded inventory now, and no one is able to solve this for us.
So the word copyright, we kind of led with this, right? The word copyright is being thrown around in all sorts of wrong contexts and situations lately. There are false allegations of counterfeit and copyright that are resulting in listing takedowns. Sometimes it's that. Sometimes you're suspended on a listing for a totally different word that has to come out and a totally different reason. Maybe, let's say, trademark keywords, and you contact account health or support, and they use the word copyright because they're assuming it's copyright. So Amazonians are using it wrong. Sellers are using it wrong. A quick run through with a real IP attorney. I understand there's lots of attorneys floating around that aren't intellectual property experts. That's kind of a problem in the Amazon space, but any cursory check by an attorney through your listing should help you understand pretty quickly if there's a copyrighted or a trademark term in there. The rest of it's just misinformation on Amazon's side, and you're appealing that the same way you would any other bogus IP complaint. There's lots of patent trolling going on. This is why IP issues, that's a whole other story for another time. Fake trademark complaints, bogus copyright complaints. It's worth mentioning to people that Amazon is telling people to email a queue that doesn't exist anymore, notice dispute. Lots of emails to notice-dispute at Amazon, whether it's from rights owners retracting a claim or sellers, are bouncing. And Amazonians are telling everyone to use it. So they're telling you to use a queue that's bouncing.
Because they don't know.
Perfect way to end this webinar, because
They don't know.
they either don't know or they don't have another one to suggest. And the fact that that's coming from inside the company shows you what you're looking. You really need to run a tight ship, because they're definitely not. So if the two of you aren't running a tight ship, it's the blind leading the blind and nothing will get fixed. If it's just their confusion, you're going to have to help them clear up their own confusion.
There's so much you have to think about, and I'm just going to end on that. There's so much you have to think about.
It's tough.
What we do every day is make sure you understand your marketplace, you understand your brand's position, you understand your ACOS, you understand your ad spend, you understand all kinds of things. Flywheel 2.0 is coming out soon. You're going to understand a lot more when that comes out. Yep. We're committed to helping you understand your business and your profitability, but you have to know the rules too. Otherwise, none of that means anything. And the rules are tricky. So that's why there are people like Chris, there are people like me who, like, I'm a rule hobbyist, I guess, nowadays.
Well, but you know a lot.
Well, and
thank you for having me, by the way.
Thank you for being here. And, you know, obviously with reviews and all that coming, I encourage you to talk to Becky at eCom Engine. She was my last guest, not our last guest, but my last guest here. But Chris, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I want to talk to you again.
Instead of just us. But if you guys have questions for Chris, or you've got a thing that you want him to look into, you've got a POA you need to create, you've got an escalation you need to do, he and Leah can help you. They are dynamite. It's ecommercechris.com. We're going to put
7 days a week. Yeah. I mean, it's 7 days a week. It shouldn't be 7 days a week.
It's
7 days a week in Q4, because on weekends, I do often set aside some time to review people's POAs before they send them in. Please don't just wing these things and bang them out and send them in. You're just digging a deeper hole. So, I mean, if you have to just run it by me fast, then.
And I will caution you that not everybody in the industry does things the way Chris and Leah do. Chris has a deep understanding of Amazon policy and how Amazon works, because he used to work there and because he stayed in close touch all these years. So we're 2 minutes over. Chris, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everybody for joining us.
Stay safe, everybody.
Today. You'll get the replay in your email along with a recap, all of the resources we talked about, and then we'll work on some content to address the rest of your questions. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye. I gotta go.